The Olight R50 Pro Seeker is an incredibly bright flashlight. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily a flashlight newbie, but I'm not one of those guys who can, list off all the specs on top of my head, and I'm not one of those guys who knows the internals better than the engineers who build them. What I can say though is, I always have to have a flashlight around this house. My property is, it's not huge, but it's about 5 acres. And we're out in the middle of the country, so there's not a lot of light poles, and not a lot of electronic lights around other than the ones that I myself provide and have hooked up on my house. So it's nice to have a flashlight like this that has a little bit of reach to it, has a lot of potential power for when I'm walking my dog, or if I hear a noise, or better yet, when I'm hunting towards sunset and I manage to take a deer out and I can't quite find it in the dark. This little guy on 3200 lumens is incredibly bright, makes finding that kill very easy. Now, one of the things I'm not a huge fan of on the light is the lack of a rear pressure switch, because I like to be able to hold the flashlight and then hold a gun simultaneously if I have to, because obviously this guy is way too big to mount on a firearm. That said, the switch up front's not terrible, and you can get used to it fairly quickly, but you can tell that it was meant to be held kind of low by your waist or whatnot, and not like a tactical light, which is meant to be held up high. So it has 4 settings. The first setting is just 50 lumens. It's kind of for like looking in small confined spaces and if you want to have a lot of battery life. Second setting is 400 lumens, which is still very bright, very useful. It's a nice medium between like super bright and still being able to see things at night. The high setting is 1500 lumens, which is awesome. And then the turbo mode is 3200 lumens. Now, according to the back of the box, it says that turbo mode is 3200 lumens initially for a minute and a half. And then because it protects itself against overheating, it drops down to 1000 lumens. At 1000 lumens, it can then run for 150 minutes before it drains the entire battery. Similarly, on high setting, it goes from 1500 lumens to 1000 lumens, but in that instance, after 10 minutes of operation instead of a minute and a half. 400 lumens can run for 7.5 hours, and if you run the flashlight on 60 lumens or the low setting, it runs for 50 hours. Now the whole thing runs on a single 26-650 lithium-ion battery. This thing is massive and it produces a ton of power. It's a 16.6 watt, 4500 milliamp, 3.7 volt battery. It's awesome. And it's of course rechargeable and utilizes that magnetic charger we spoke about earlier. Now the cap itself is knurled all the way around so you can easily get it on and off if you need. And those same semi-deep but not really like super aggressive serrations are present throughout, so you get a good positive hold on the flashlight should your hands be oily or wet. The flashlight is waterproof up to 2 meters, and in my experience thus far, I really like it. It's a very bright flashlight. It's going to replace the one I've got right now. I currently use a Phoenix flashlight, and while I really like that flashlight, the fact that it doesn't readily use rechargeable batteries means that it costs me a small fortune to operate it on a regular basis. And so rechargeable battery flashlights like this Olight that have a high output potential are perfect for guys like myself who use this every single day. The flashlight retails for I think about $149. Olight is going to be running a sale on July 29th on this, and they asked me to mention that to you guys. If you want to buy one and you think it's a good looking flashlight, go ahead. So far, I've had no problems with it. I've dropped it a few times. I've ran it completely dead on battery at least a dozen times, and it charges fairly quick and it runs pretty well. It does get kind of hot, and I will say this, on both the high and the turbo setting, you can actually feel it start to burn your skin on contact within a few seconds. It is extraordinarily bright. And one last thing to mention about those modes of operation. So if you press the switch once, it goes to low. If you hold it, it steps up to medium, another time to high. And if you double tap it, it goes to turbo mode. If you triple tap the button, it goes to strobe. The strobe option being for blinding or disorienting targets if they're attacking you, or I guess animals, or I guess pocket rave or whatever. But it's a nice little flashlight, and I think it would make an excellent tack light, especially with the LE setup, for police officers, security guards, anyone who really needs a compact, not a Coke can size flashlight that has a lot of performance in a somewhat compact size. I'm not going to carry this flashlight, but I like with the magnetic charger the fact that I can sit up on my bedside and see that little red light on the bottom if it still needs to be charged, and a green light once it's done charging. And so I can know immediately that the flashlight by my bedside is always good to go. Yes, I tend to use a weapon-mounted light primarily, but it's good to have a light that's not mounted on a weapon of any type, so you don't have to flag something to determine if it's a threat or not, because if it's a police officer, you might just get shot. Anyway, I think it's a pretty solid light, especially for the price, and it'll be replacing my previous bedside light that I've had now for about 8 years, and we'll see if it holds up to the use and abuse of someone as clumsy as myself. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and of course, don't forget to swing on over to patreon.com/burstreview and throw us a few bucks if you can spare it. Thanks, guys.